Today we're going to look at how to dig sunchokes. So we have a patch of sunchokes here behind me. These are a red sunchoke. And one thing you'll see here is that they're all dyed back. You want to harvest sunchokes when they're dyed back because that's what will turn the inulin, which is a starchy sugar, into a sugar that we can digest. You've probably heard of sunchokes called fartichokes. That's because of the inulin and how it works in your system. The bacteria eat that inulin, you can't digest it, and it turns into gas. So we've had some freezes here. We're in mid-December, and we're going to be digging some of these. Now, there's no easy way to dig sunchokes. They're down in the ground. You got to get them out. But I'm going to show you the technique that I use that I find is probably about as easy as it gets. All right, so let's take a look at the tools that we're going to be using. So I've got a standard shovel. You could just use a typical spade. Anything works there. Pitchfork. And because the soil here was pretty rough, I have a breaker bar, which I find is nice to break it up. One thing you'll find about sunchokes is that they will turn around really poor soil pretty quickly. And so in this spot, I wasn't too worried about this being good soil. This was practically a parking pad before I planted them. And within a few years, putting down compost and the sunchokes doing their thing, that soil will be greatly improved. You will see, though, as I'm digging to the bottom of these trenches, I'll need to use the pitchfork or the breaker bar to get that a little bit deeper than I originally had it. So the first thing I'm going to do is get a little trench here dug. And this was already dug out, so it's easy digging. And I already know that there's no sunchokes in here. It eroded back in a little bit. And then what you can see is that I've got this trench, and I know that there's no sunchokes in here or here. And so what I'm going to start to do is just kind of knock this in, and I'll start to get out some sunchokes. So I have a couple different buckets. One bucket's going to be for little ones, which we can use essentially for sunchoke seed, putting those tubers in the ground. So that'll plant our new batch next year. So then I've got a bucket for rocks. The rock bucket is going to be for any little rocks. It's a lot easier to harvest the sunchokes if you're not going through a bunch of rocks. So that'll make it easier next year. And then essentially I'm just going to start to pull this down. Usually anything maybe that big and above, I'll go ahead and put in the harvest bucket. Anything smaller, I'll put aside, so you can just sort of stack them over here first. And I'm basically just bringing that soil down, finding the sunchokes. You might wonder why I'm not using the pitchfork. What happens if you use the pitchfork is that I'll end up damaging a lot of the sunchokes. If you're just planning on cooking and eating them the same day, that might be fine, and that might be an easier way to go. I'm giving these sunchokes to a restaurant, and so we want to make sure that they're nice and presentable and don't have a bunch of pitchfork marks in them. So that's why I'm just getting down here with my hands. You can see it's pretty easy. The soil's loose. Just kind of gathering all these sunchokes up. These have only been here 2 years. So this is the second year we're harvesting them. And once I get down kind of below where the sunchokes are, probably because the soil was a little too tough down there, I'm going to go ahead and fork it up. So let's do that. All right, so for this, I'm just going to quickly loosen that soil down deeper. So I'm just forking soil, getting it kind of loose here. And I'm actually going to go throw on some knee pads. Pro tip, put on the knee pads before you start digging. You'll remember pretty quick when your knees are getting real cold and wet. I like these cheapo anvil ones. You get these at Home Depot. I think about $13, and I like them because you can just throw them right in the wash. And when they get worn out, you can just throw them away. All right, so now that we have this loosened up, we can basically go on just pull that soil out, and we're basically back right to where we were. So I'm going to take this batch, put those in the bigger ones in the keep bucket. So let's talk about the size I like for seed. So this is pretty good. You see it's a nice round shape. It's got lots of little eyes. We'll end up planting these. I'll do another video on planting sunchokes either later this winter or in the spring. But this is what I'm generally looking for. So we want to keep those, and we'll just keep these outside where it's cool. I usually cover them with some wood chips and then put them in a bucket on the side, or if you have some kind of like a milk crate with some drainage, you can go ahead and use that too. So now I'm just going to keep kind of going across here, pulling out the sunchokes. Looks like there's a bit more in this area than that last area. Sometimes that'll happen. Now these red ones will go deeper. I've planted these in really deep pots before, and they go all the way down 3 or 4 feet if the soil will let them. These are a little shallower because the soil, as I mentioned, was really compact. So rock. So I timed this last time. I got about 15 pounds plus of usable ones, not counting the seed size, in about an hour. So it is pretty labor intensive, but these are a nice crop through the winter. You can leave them in the ground until they, before they start to sprout in the spring. So probably at least till March. And it gives you a good crop to eat or sell all winter long. Of course, it's nice to find these nicer days to harvest them. And I like to harvest them pretty much when I'm going to use them. But you could also harvest them early. You don't want to keep them inside. Again, just put them in a milk crate, put some wood chips around them, and just let them be cold and damp. And just like kind of like they're in the ground. And that'll make them keep pretty much as good as you're going to get. So there I have another sort of band done. I'm just going to go ahead and do 2 this time. By creating this trench, it gives me sort of a controlled way to move from one side to the other. If I was just sort of trying to dig down into the soil, it's really easy to miss a bunch. Hard to tell where you've already gotten them from. And so this way, sort of a predictable way to make sure you're getting as much of these out of here as we can get. So last time I dug these, found some slugs had actually gotten into a few. I think maybe they'd been a little unearthed towards the surface, and like these are here. And I think that might have is what caused it. Yeah, you can see this one has some slug damage. Now this would be a little easier if I wasn't loosening the soil at the same time, but I want a little bit better yield next year, so I'm going to let the roots go a little deeper. I actually like that there's hard pan down underneath here because it does keep them from going too deep to where I can't really harvest them easily. But having them at least a good foot and a half that they can go down. And now this, as you can see, will be mounded up again. We'll put some new compost over the top once we plant them out. And this soil in another few years is going to be great. You can see here, there's some pretty poor soil. That's what all the soil looked like when I started. It's basically just really hard, sandy loam. So it's a good foundation for soil, but there isn't much in the way of organic matter. It was quite compressed. So the sunchokes are just doing a good job of helping to break up the soil and provide organic matter. So now that I'm getting to this part, I've got all these sunchoke tops. Because I've let these in a while, these will just pull up. And for the most part, when won't bring any sunchokes with them. If there are a few, you can just pluck them off. Little teeny one there. Even a very, very small sunchoke will grow. Probably brings another topic you'll hear people say is don't plant sunchokes where you don't want to keep sunchokes. They can be pretty difficult to remove from that area once you're done. A few more good ones that got pulled out. So I'll just continue this process, moving down the row, and let's check in when we're done. All right, so it's about 30 minutes after we just did the last cut. We went through, followed the process, just rinse and repeat, and we ended up with about 18 pounds of good sized sunchokes, and then several pounds, let's see here, about almost 8 pounds of these small ones. Now you could certainly eat these small ones. You could do sort of like a baked, bake them or roast them, but for sale, we often just sell the larger. These also can be used essentially as your seed when we replant the bed. Now, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, sunchokes are very difficult to get rid of once you plant them somewhere. So even though we were pretty careful about getting it all, probably we missed enough that if we didn't do anything, we would see sunchokes come up here. But to get a nice even crop next year, we'll plant these smaller ones to, once we shape up this bed, we'll do another video on that. We also got approximately 18 pounds of larger size. So you can see these are, the kind of thing that you might want to give to a restaurant or even cook yourself. So altogether, a pretty good haul in about 45 minutes. It's not super easy, it's not super fast, but it's not too bad for a pretty good haul of sunchokes. One last thing I'll mention, I just use a crane scale like this for doing the weight measurements. If you're just doing this for yourself, you don't need to worry about that. But you can buy these on Amazon. Put a link to one of those down in the description below. Thanks for joining. Hit like, subscribe, leave a comment, and all that good stuff. Thanks for joining us today.